Hey, James, you're back early. I thought you wouldn't return until Sunday. It's my house. I don't owe anyone an explanation for when I come and go. No need to be defensive. I was just asking because you mentioned being gone for the weekend. But fine, let's not argue. Did you bring dinner? I didn't make anything. There were leftovers from this morning, and I spent the day catching up on housework. Of course, you probably just lounged around all day watching TV. Typical. Why would you say that? Give me 20 minutes, and I'll fix something for you. I provide for you, give you a comfortable life, and this is how you repay me, being lazy and ungrateful. Hello, my name is Emily. I'm 39 and have been married to James for 8 years. I grew up with my single mother, and after high school, I started working to help her out. My first job was as a cashier at a local supermarket. I saved every penny I could and worked long hours, sometimes 2 shifts back-to-back during the busy seasons. Eventually, a friend taught me some finance basics, and I began handling the store's accounts and inventory. The owner took notice, and before long, I was promoted to manager, overseeing the entire staff. One day, a customer stormed in, furious, claiming he'd lost his wallet and accusing one of my employees of taking it. I stepped in calmly, reminding him that everyone was responsible for their belongings. Despite his frustration, I remained composed, offering to help him find it. As he vented, I discreetly messaged security to pull up footage from the past 17 minutes in the aisle where he'd been shopping. At the same time, I called the local police for assistance. "Sir," I interrupted gently, "we have the footage, and the police are already on their way. We've identified a suspect." Sure enough, the police arrived quickly, reviewed the footage, and recognized the culprit as a local thief. They took down the details and assured us they'd apprehend him. The next day, while I was immersed in my work, the same customer came back. "Hey, I didn't get a chance to properly thank you for helping me yesterday," he said. Curious, I asked if he'd found his wallet. He told me that the police had caught the thief in a nearby lane, and everything had been returned to him. He was clearly relieved and grateful for how fast we'd acted. Blushing a little from the attention, I shrugged it off, saying, "I was just doing my job. I'm glad it worked out." He apologized for his behavior the day before, explaining that he was new in town and had panicked when he lost his ID and credit cards. I reassured him that it was understandable. Then, he asked for my name. "Emily," I replied. He introduced himself as James, explaining he lived just a few buildings away. To thank me properly, he asked if I'd like to grab a coffee. At first, I hesitated, unsure if it was a good idea, but his sincerity won me over, and I agreed. That was the beginning of our story, an unexpected connection from a chaotic moment at the supermarket leading to our first date. Our connection deepened with time, and a few months into our relationship, when my lease expired, James suggested I move in with him. Those days were the happiest I'd ever known. We fell in love effortlessly. James worked long hours at an IT company, but our weekends were filled with parties and adventures, making life feel vibrant. For 3 wonderful years, we built a relationship that seemed unbreakable. One afternoon, during a casual chat with my mom, she shared something that struck me deeply. "Emily, after your father passed, I poured everything into raising you. It's been my greatest joy to see you grow into such a strong, independent woman." Something in her voice made me uneasy. "Why are you saying this, Mom? Is everything okay?" "Honey, I'm getting older, and I worry that one day I'll be gone, and you'll be left alone. I just want to see you settle down. I want to see you as a bride before I go." I brushed it off at first, uncomfortable with the thought, but her words stuck with me. That evening, when James saw I wasn't myself, he asked what was bothering me. "Hey, what's wrong? You've been quiet all night." Reluctantly, I told him about my mom's concerns. To my surprise, he didn't hesitate. "I've actually been thinking about it too. Let's get married." "Are you serious?" My heart raced as I waited for his response. "Of course I'm serious." The joy I felt was indescribable. I practically jumped on the bed in excitement. We soon introduced each other to our families and shared the news. My mom, overwhelmed with emotion, asked James to take good care of me, her only family. His parents welcomed me warmly, thrilled by our decision. After we married, life was blissful for a while. Though James expressed hesitation about having children, he enjoyed our carefree, spontaneous lifestyle, but I had always dreamed of starting a family, and eventually, he agreed. 6 years into our marriage, we welcomed our daughter Megan, who became the light of our lives. Balancing work and caring for a newborn was harder than I imagined, so James suggested I take a break from my job to focus on Megan. He assured me his income would be enough to support us, and I trusted him. But as time passed, James's support in the house diminished. While he was attentive during my pregnancy, helping out when he could, after Megan arrived, he became more distant. His once helpful attitude shifted to complaints about being tired, even with the simplest tasks like picking up groceries. At first, I thought he was just adjusting to the changes in our lives, as we both had to give up our adventurous weekends for diaper changes and sleepless nights. But the shift in his attitude grew more pronounced. He began to criticize me, claiming I was lazy, that I wasn't pulling my weight. Our conversations grew tense, and the carefree love we once shared felt like a distant memory. I tried everything to make him happy. I cooked his favorite meals, kept the house spotless, and took full responsibility for Megan. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. James started going out without me, often coming home late from work, claiming he needed a break. Soon, weekends were filled with parties and outings with friends, without me. The more I tried to hold things together, the more resentful he became. He would nitpick every little thing. The food wasn't good enough, the house wasn't clean enough, my efforts weren't enough. I began to question myself, wondering if I was failing as a wife and mother. James, in his frustration, made it clear that he missed the freedom we once had before parenthood. Despite his love for Megan, he resented the sacrifices we had to make, and I could see the strain it put on him. I suggested he continue his social life, hoping it would ease the tension, but it didn't. His complaints escalated, and soon, even minor things set him off. The warmth in his voice disappeared, replaced with irritation. I felt trapped in a cycle of trying to please someone who no longer seemed to care. Thoughts of divorce crept into my mind, but the fear of being alone, especially after losing my mom, kept me from acting on it. With no one to turn to, I felt isolated. Megan's well-being became my only priority, and the thought of raising her alone, possibly in poverty, terrified me. So, I stayed, I endured, but as the years went by, the love I had for James withered away, the loneliness grew, and with it, the realization that I had lost myself in a relationship that was slowly crumbling. I stayed, not because I wanted to, but because I was too afraid to leave. I longed for Megan to grow older, hoping it would free me from this miserable situation. Until then, I had no choice but to endure James's erratic behavior. One evening, when he crossed the line, it was during a weekend he was supposed to spend with friends. I hadn't cooked dinner, relying on leftovers from lunch, but James unexpectedly came home early. "James, you're back. I thought you wouldn't return until Sunday," I said, trying to hide my surprise. His face darkened, and he snapped, "This is my house. I come and go as I please. I don't owe you an explanation." This aggressive tone had become his norm. When I calmly asked why he was upset, he shouted, "Why are you making a fuss? I said I'd be gone for the weekend. Just shut up already. I don't have time to argue with you, go make me dinner." I explained that since we had leftovers, I hadn't cooked a new meal. But he immediately accused me of being lazy. I knew it. "You've been sitting around doing nothing all day while I'm gone." Trying to de-escalate, I offered to prepare something in 20 minutes, but he kept attacking. "You're useless. Always clumsy, turning this house into a mess." He pointed to Megan's toys scattered around, even though it was normal for a home with a child to have some clutter. Then he marched into the kitchen, complaining about a single unwashed plate, something I planned to clean after dinner. When I asked why he was overreacting, he completely lost it. He stormed to the fridge, grabbed whatever he could, and threw it on the floor. Furious, he tossed the leftover food into the sink. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Stop it, James. I've worked hard to keep this house in order. This place was filthy when I moved in, and I've cleaned it, managed the house, and worked a job even before we were married." But he wasn't listening. "I gave you a life of comfort, and you're still ungrateful. You used to live in that tiny, shabby apartment, but I took pity on you and brought you into my home. I could have married someone smarter, someone better, but I settled for you, a cashier. I took you to places you could have and never afforded. You should be thanking me instead of whining. Just do your job and serve me. Humiliated, tears stung my eyes. I tried to speak through the sobs. I thought you did all this because you loved me, not as some favor. But he brushed off my pain, accusing me of manipulating him with emotions, claiming I had trapped him. He stormed out, leaving me alone in the house, crushed and missing my mom more than ever, reminiscing about the days when we were happy. The next day, James returned. As soon as I opened the door, he handed me divorce papers. Sign them, he demanded coldly. Exhausted, I agreed without a fight, surprising him with my calm response. Annoyed, he said, "Good. It's better this way, or I'd make your life hell." Feeling liberated, I packed my things, gave him an envelope, and told him I'd send the signed papers with my conditions. He scoffed, calling me a parasite who had lived off him for years. He swore I wouldn't get a penny. But I calmly mentioned going to court, and his smugness faltered when he opened the envelope. Inside were copies of all the evidence I had against him, gathered by an investigator I'd hired. They had uncovered the reason for James's sudden shift, his infidelity. The photos were undeniable. I had seen the proof earlier that day. Instead of spending weekends with friends, James was with different women. Even after all his cruelty, I had thought about giving him another chance. But when I saw the evidence, I knew I had to end it. When James saw it, he barely flinched. "I wasn't serious about any of them," he said dismissively, "just having a little fun." His words enraged me. Fun? I've let you stay out late, go on vacations without me, hoping you'd step up as a father. But you grew distant after Megan was born. I gave up everything to focus on our family, and this is how you repay me? But James didn't care. He just stood there, indifferent, as the life we had built together crumbled. In response to James's betrayal, I scooped up our daughter, Megan, and left the house, checking into a hotel for a few days. I reached out to my former boss at the supermarket where I had once worked, sharing my situation with him. He was taken aback and immediately offered me a position in inventory management. Familiar with the staff and the work environment, I quickly settled back into my role. My boss even arranged for temporary accommodation in an apartment recently vacated by previous tenants. During this period, I hired a lawyer and sent divorce terms to James, demanding child support and significant alimony due to his infidelity. While he attempted to negotiate and called for reconciliation, I stood firm, determined to seek compensation for the pain and trauma he had caused. James hadn't limited himself to a single affair. He had engaged in multiple relationships with various women, including colleagues and random acquaintances from parties and trips. His involvement with the wrong crowd had also led to occasional drug use, likely fueling his escalating anger and frustration directed at me. Distraught by his actions, I contacted James's parents and revealed the disturbing details of his behavior. They were devastated to learn the extent of his wrongdoing. To further expose his actions, I sent them incriminating photos showing him in compromising situations with his colleagues at work. My lawyer informed me that James was facing challenges at his job, with co-workers aware of his affairs. His manager had even threatened to fire him if he didn't change his behavior. Many of the colleagues involved had left the office in shame, their reputations irreparably damaged. Despite the fallout, James continued working to meet his financial obligations, including alimony and child support. Several months later, I received a remorseful email from him. He acknowledged the damage his actions had done to our relationship and expressed gratitude for the care I had provided, realizing the importance of my role in maintaining our home. However, despite the emotional weight of his message, I refused to entertain the idea of reconciliation. His nostalgia stemmed from the comfort I had given him, which could never erase the reality of his mistreatment. Throughout our relationship, he had made me feel expendable, eroding my self-esteem with his arrogance and disdain. I couldn't go back to a life where my daughter saw me being treated like a doormat. Prioritizing our well-being, I used my savings and alimony to secure an apartment, allowing us to live with dignity. I was committed to creating a nurturing environment for Megan, one that emphasized the importance of self-worth. Through my earnings and child support, I was determined to provide her with a solid foundation, aspiring to see her grow into a confident and independent woman.